My name is Dana Davis. I'm 26, and this is the year I learned that silence can be louder than a scream. Thanksgiving at our place was never the warm movie kind. No flour on noses, no golden retriever stealing the turkey in a lovable heist. It was the metallic kind of noise, forks clinking like arguments in Morse code, compliments that came wrapped in razor wire, gratitude, weaponized. Dad always cut the turkey like he was negotiating with it. This year, he sharpened the knife long enough for everyone to get uncomfortable. Mom overpoured the Pinot. Rachel, my older sister, MBA crown polished to a smug shine, held court about resilience and family legacy. Her husband nod-smiled like a campaign photo. Their kids were adorable and sticky, which is the only kind of kid allowed at our table. Rachel raised her glass. We all lift each other up, even Dana, who lifts air conditioners. She grinned at her own joke. Everyone laughed. I did too, the practiced laugh of a woman who knows better than to give them new material. Mom set the rolls down like a peace treaty. Dad stood, fork in one hand, wine in the other. He looked right at me, not through me, not past me, at me, which was new enough to hurt. To Dana, he said, the Leech. He took a sip like it didn't cost him anything to say it. November is your last month here. Time to grow up. Silence fell so fast, the cranberry sauce congealed in shock. My niece asked what a leech was. Rachel said, "It's like a little worm that lives off others, honey." Mom stared into her lap like the answer was embroidered there. I sliced a piece of turkey, chewed, swallowed. Pass the gravy, please. If there's one lesson I learned under this roof, it's that emotion is ammunition. And I was done handing them bullets. It wasn't the eviction that burned me. It was how he said it, like it was a gift, like the clocking out of a longtime employee with a sheet cake and a shrug. I could have stood up. I could have told them every bill I'd paid, every filter I'd changed, every late notice I caught before it embarrassed them. Instead, I made a different plan, not a scene, a system. My phone buzzed under the table. Liam, boyfriend, a quiet soul with warm hands, texted, "You good?" I typed, "Later." He replied with a blue heart and a picture of the tiny plant I'd left on his windowsill. In that moment, I understood what home could feel like. Not a place, but a person who doesn't ask for proof. What Dad didn't know, and Rachel never cared to, was that the so-called Leech had the accounts. Wi-Fi, gas, power, water, not for control, for survival. Years of, can you just put it in your name for the discount? Their way of outsourcing adulthood to the person easiest to ignore. We ate the rest of dinner in a tense, careful choreography. Rachel toasted new beginnings, by which she meant hers. Dad complimented the stuffing he didn't make. Mom cleared plates like apologies. I washed dishes and built a checklist in my head so clean it gleamed. After dessert, Rachel's husband cornered me by the fridge. "No hard feelings, he said, the way people do right before they hand you their hard feelings like a casserole. Your skill set is so practical. Rachel always said you'd be great at a business if someone handled the front end." He smiled like he'd just offered me salvation. I closed the fridge and let the light die on his face. By the time I was in my room, the house had settled into its usual fugue. TV murmurs, distant laughter, Dad's cough. The walls still remembered the posters I'd ripped down and the dent from an old argument. My toolbox sat under the window where I could see the label maker tape I'd stuck to every drawer. Precision was my love language. Pity it wasn't theirs. I started packing, not the melodramatic way, not the slam a suitcase and cry into a hoodie way. Surgical, like triage. Tools, boots, favorite flannel, coffee maker. The essentials for a life that wouldn't apologize for existing. What I didn't pack was guilt. It's heavier than it looks, and it never fits. On my desk was a photo, Rachel and me at graduation. She's in heels. I'm in steel toes peeking from under my gown. Her arm is around me, but her eyes are on the camera, perfectly framed. Mine are on her, trying to make sure she doesn't trip. The story of us, in one shot. My phone buzzed again, this time from a number I hadn't seen in months. Tara, Liam's ex. Once upon a time, she'd posted, "Some people love playing the victim while mooching off family," and tagged no one while meaning me. Rachel had liked it. Dad had read it, and suddenly the story clicked for them. I was the liability they never audited. I stared at the screen until the message preview timed out and the light died. Then I turned the phone face down. At midnight, I opened my laptop. The router blinked in the hallway like it knew its execution date was nigh. I logged in. Billing profile, my name. One click canceled the plan effective tonight. Utilities, gas, power, water, set to terminate December 1st. Streaming services, new passwords, new profile names, actually mine, not today, Carol, and the kid's profile renamed Ask Your Parents. Petty? Maybe. Honest? Absolutely. It felt less like revenge and more like inventory. Taking back what belonged to me, returning what never did. I wasn't burning bridges. I was removing toll booths I had been forced to man without pay. By morning, the house was too quiet. No blender pulverizing mom's kale into penance. No Rachel corralling toddlers with call and response threats. No dad arguing with the Weather Channel. Just a kind of stillness that felt like a confession. I showered, changed into jeans that had known real work, and walked into the kitchen. Mom was there, scrolling, worry softening her face into something almost teenage. Donna, are you really leaving? The voice of a woman who'd watched it all happen and wished the ending would write itself. I set my keys on the counter. She said, "You don't have to make this a thing." That line, our family's rubber stamp. They used it on feelings, boundaries, truth. Don't make it a thing. Translation, don't make us look at it. I didn't answer. I picked up my duffel, slung the toolbox over my shoulder, and walked out the front door. I did not slam it. I did not cry. I did not explain. Explanations in this house turned into exhibits against you. The sky outside was a flat winter sheet. My truck coughed to life because it, at least, understood my language. Coax, don't command. As I pulled away, the house shrank in the rear view until it looked exactly like what it was, a structure I had kept warm and humming while being called cold and useless, a machine that only noticed the cog when the gear dared to stop. My new place had crooked floors and a fridge that growled hourly like it remembered a better kitchen, but the lease had my name. The keys were mine. The silence inside wasn't punishment. It was possibility. I set the duffel down, cracked a cheap beer, and sat on an overturned milk crate, feeling the room decide I could stay. 2 sips in, my phone lit up. Mom, 6:43 p.m. Can you check the Wi-Fi settings? Something's off. I laughed out loud, the brittle kind. Sure. Let me just resurrect the thing I executed with precision. Maybe I'll handwrite an apology to the modem while I'm at it. Mom, 8:15 p.m. Your dad can't get the fireplace going. It's freezing. Rachel says it's the pilot light. Can you swing by? They thought I'd left with my bags. They didn't realize I'd also left with the knowledge, the invisible glue. I didn't respond. Explanation is a currency you spend only when you're being paid in respect. By 10 p.m., the group chat pinged. A rare dad appearance. Donna, this isn't how adults behave. Come home. Fix the heat. You live here. And that, right there, was the punchline of my life. 24 hours after toasting my eviction, I suddenly lived there again. When it was convenient. I put the phone face down and let the apartment be a body that finally exhaled. Morning brought the knock I'd been waiting for, the rhythm of a man used to being obeyed. I looked through the peephole. Dad. Flannel robe. My toolbox in his hand. I opened the door slowly, like you answer a package you didn't order. He brushed past me like he owned the deed. The gas line's not kicking in, he said, dropping the box on my counter like a gauntlet. Thermostat's flashing like it's possessed. You gonna help or what? I folded my arms. I don't live there anymore, remember? Don't make this emotional, he snapped. The family's cold. The kids are shivering. So now I'm family. He flinched. The smallest truth always bruises. He tried again. I didn't mean what I said at dinner. You took it the wrong way. Holiday pressure, your sister, wine. The heat works, I said quietly. He blinked. It's not the system. It's the account. I let the word hang there, the one thing in that house I controlled without argument. I shut it off. The leech has unlatched. He stared at me like I'd set fire to the family tree. You canceled the heat in winter? I ended everything I paid for, I said. You raised a glass and called me a parasite. I listened. We held the silence between us like a fragile object, something you don't drop if you ever want to look at it again. He lifted the toolbox, slower this time, as if it had acquired the weight of every unspoken thank you. At the threshold, he said, You used to be the dependable one. No, I said, voice even. I was just quiet. And I closed the door on the draft that had lived in my life for years. The next morning felt heavier than it should have, not because of guilt, because of air, air that no longer hummed with the low static of being watched. I brewed coffee in my new kitchen, listening to the creaks in the floorboards like the apartment was whispering, "Welcome home," finally. The steam fogged the window, and in that blur, I could almost see my old house. Rachel's SUV parked like a trophy in the driveway, Dad probably blaming Mom for something mechanical he didn't understand, Mom quietly internalizing it, and the thermostat blinking for mercy. For once, not my problem. By noon, I was sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes labeled keep, maybe, and never again. I'd finished labeling my emotions the same way years ago. The never again box was always full. The first message came at 1:07 p.m. Mom, Dana, could you check if the Wi-Fi bill went through? Rachel says nothing's working. I didn't answer. She followed up 15 minutes later. Your father's cranky. He's been trying to call the provider, but they said the account holder has to verify. That word again, account holder. The one title no one toasted me for. At 3:00 p.m., I got a text from Rachel. Did you seriously cancel everything? What about the kids? Their shows? Their schoolwork? I stared at the screen, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, then typed a message I never sent. Maybe teach them how to download accountability instead. By sunset, the group chat lit up. Dad, uncharacteristically tech-savvy when angry, typed, "You need to grow up, Dana. Real adults don't punish family." I nearly laughed. Punish? If anything, I was introducing them to a new subject, cause and effect. That night, I got another knock at the door. It wasn't frantic. It was rhythmic, deliberate, the kind of knock men use when they think they still have authority in your life. I looked through the peephole. Dad again. Jeans this time, not his robe. He was learning presentation. Don't you ever answer your phone? He snapped as soon as I cracked the door open. He looked around like he couldn't believe I had walls of my own now. Your mother's freezing. Rachel's husband can't even light the pilot. The kids. I interrupted. I told you last night. It's not the system, Dad. It's the account. He frowned. What the hell does that mean? It means, I said, leaning against the doorframe, that when you toasted to my eviction, you also toasted to paying your own bills. Congratulations. You canceled the utilities? Who does that to their own family? The person who was their own family's utility, I said, for 6 years straight. He opened his mouth to argue, but shut it when I didn't blink. His anger didn't land anymore. It just hung there, like a joke no one laughed at. He exhaled sharply. You've really changed. I finally stopped changing to fit all of you. He left with a muttered curse, and the door caught the echo when it shut. I didn't chase after it. That weekend, I started building something new. A routine. Morning coffee, checking apartment leaks myself, sending job estimates from my phone without interruption. I even texted Liam. You'd laugh if you saw how crooked these floors are. He replied instantly, crooked floors build character and better ankles. I smiled at that. Stability. What a strange luxury. But the peace lasted barely a day. Monday morning. A voicemail. Mom's voice, shaky. Donna, please, just at least turn on the gas. Your father's trying, but it's complicated. We'll pay you back. I almost believed her, until the end, when she whispered, don't tell your dad I called. By Tuesday, the messages multiplied. Rachel sent a photo of her kids in blankets, captioned, "The kids miss Aunt Dana." It would have been cute if the timestamp wasn't followed by, also, your little stunt was immature. That word, stunt, like years of sacrifice, were a trick I pulled for applause. By Wednesday, my phone looked like a crisis hotline. 17 missed calls, half from Dad, half from Rachel, and one from a private number that I already knew was his work line. He was desperate enough to call from the office now. At 10 p.m., a text finally came from an unfamiliar number. Hi, this is Amanda from First West Energy. We received notice of termination for your household utilities. Are you the primary account holder? That phrase again, primary account holder. It should have felt bureaucratic. Instead, it felt like justice printed in 12-point font. I texted back, yes, please confirm shut-off effective December 1st. Click, sent. I slept better than I had in months. Thursday morning, the calls changed tone. They weren't scolding anymore. They were pleading. Rachel. Okay, maybe we were harsh. Can we talk? Mom. You proved your point, sweetheart. We need you home. Your father's been reflective. Dad. Enough with the drama. Just come fix this. Reflective, drama, fix. The three verbs my family lived by: rewrite, deflect, repeat. That afternoon, I stopped answering altogether. But I didn't block them. I wanted to see what happened when silence became the only language left between us. At 5 p.m., I got a text from Liam. "How's the peace treaty with the Davises?" I replied, "Ongoing ceasefire, minimal casualties." He sent back a photo of 2 mugs of coffee. "Save me a chair at your new place, the one that doesn't wobble." I wrote, "No chairs wobble here unless I let them." He replied, "That's my girl." For the first time, I smiled without it feeling like defiance. The next day, I got a knock that wasn't Dad's. When I opened the door, Aunt Melanie stood there, pale trench coat, wind in her silver hair, holding a manila folder and a pie. "Hi, sweetheart," she said gently. "Don't worry. Store-bought. I don't bake unless I'm mad." "You must be furious then," I said. She laughed softly. "You could say that." She handed me the folder. "These are transfer forms. Utilities, gas, internet, everything. They need your signature to move them out of your name. They didn't ask me to come. I volunteered." I flipped through the papers. "So they still need me?" "They do, but this isn't about them," she said. "It's about you not being tied to their mess anymore." I didn't answer right away. She filled the silence. "You're not wrong for cutting them off, Dana, but don't let them drag your credit down with them. They already owe you enough." I sighed. "You sound like a therapist." "Therapists cost money. I cost pie." She smiled. "Let me help you walk away clean." Her kindness cracked something in me. A small sound I hadn't made in weeks escaped, a breath that almost became a sob. I swallowed it down. "Thanks," I said finally. "I'll sign." She nodded. "Good. I'll drop these off myself." Before she left, she turned at the door. "They'll ask how I convinced you. What do you want me to say?" I thought for a moment. "Tell them Dana finally started charging for repairs." That night, I signed the papers quietly. No ceremony, no closure speeches, just ink on forms, officially cutting the last invisible wires tethering me to that cold, ungrateful house. It was freedom disguised as paperwork. When I placed the signed forms back in the envelope, I noticed my hands weren't shaking anymore. They hadn't been this steady in years. I took a deep breath, looked around my crooked little apartment, and whispered to the silence, "I guess this is what peace sounds like." By the weekend, my phone was a museum of missed calls. I didn't delete them, just let them sit there, like relics of old habits I refused to worship. Then, on Sunday morning, one new name flashed on the screen that made my stomach tighten. Rachel. No group chat, no sarcasm, just her. "Hey, can I stop by? I have an idea." I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. 15 minutes, that's all. She arrived early, classic Rachel move. Perfect coat, perfect hair, perfect tone-deaf optimism. She walked into my apartment like it was an open house. Her eyes flicked over the unpacked boxes and slightly tilted blinds. "Cute," she said. "Kind of rustic minimalism." I crossed my arms. Translation, cheap. She smiled. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." She sighed, placing her tote on the counter like she was about to negotiate a contract. "Look, Dana, things got a little tense. Dad's temper, your reaction." "My reaction?" I echoed. "I just mean, you overcorrected." That word hit like a cold slap. Overcorrected. Funny how people who never noticed your sacrifices always notice your boundaries. Rachel shifted gears, softening her tone. "Anyway, I didn't come to argue. I came to propose something." "Oh, this should be good." She straightened her shoulders, MBA posture loading. "What if we go into business together?" I blinked. "You're serious?" "Totally. You've got skills, maintenance, HVAC, plumbing, all that stuff. I've got marketing, design, and contacts. We could build a brand. Davis Sisters Repair and Renovate. Catchy, right?" "Depends who's paying for the website." She gave a little laugh, expecting me to join. I didn't. "Rachel," I said slowly, "you remember your Pinterest shop idea? The one Mom and Dad invested in?" Her jaw tightened. "That was years ago." "Yeah, and you still haven't paid them back." "That's not fair." "No," I said, cutting her off. "Fair would have been someone toasting to you for once." The silence between us was sharp enough to cut drywall. Finally, she said, "You really hate us, don't you?" I leaned on the counter. "No, hate takes energy. I just finally stopped giving you mine." She stared at me for a long second, lips pressed tight, before grabbing her tote. "You're impossible." "Boundaried," I corrected. "It's new." Rachel turned at the door. "Mom's crying every night, you know. Dad's trying." "Trying what?" I asked. "To make the heater work?" Her glare was icy enough to fog the air. Then she left. I watched her car pull away from the window, her perfect life trailing behind like exhaust. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Not Rachel. Dad. You win. Gas company says they can't transfer the account without you. Just sign the damn papers. I didn't reply. I wanted him to sit in the discomfort of needing me. At midnight, I finally opened my laptop to check my inbox. There it was. An email from First West Energy confirming account holder verification pending signature. I laughed quietly. Bureaucracy, my new best friend. But right below it was another email from the property manager of the house my parents still lived in. Subject, pending utility liens, Davis Residence. Apparently, because all utilities were in my name, the property's accounts couldn't legally transfer without my signature, which meant, until I said otherwise, Dad's house sat in limbo. Powerless. The irony nearly made me choke on my tea. For years, I'd been the invisible circuit keeping that family running. Now, the lights wouldn't come on without me. The next morning, I woke to 3 voicemails. Mom, whispering like she was hiding. Sweetheart, please, your father won't admit it, but he needs your help. The kids are coughing. Please sign whatever they need. Dad, you're being ridiculous, Dana. You think this makes you strong? It makes you cruel. Rachel, okay, this is beyond petty now. You're acting like some kind of villain. Villain. I'd been called worse. At least villains get origin stories. By Wednesday, the desperation took on a new flavor. Bargaining. A small knock on my door. When I opened it, Aunt Melanie stood there again, holding the same manila folder, plus a second item, a check envelope. From your dad, she said softly. I frowned. What's this? She handed it over. $1,200. Same amount you used to cover every month, apparently. He says it's repayment. I opened it, glanced at the check, then closed the envelope and handed it back. Keep it. Melanie blinked. You sure? That's a lot to turn down. It's rent, I said, for November. He already paid in humiliation. Melanie exhaled like she'd been holding that breath for a while. You really are your grandfather's girl. Meaning? He once told your father that apologies without accountability are just noise. Looks like you inherited that wisdom. Later that night, I sat by my window, watching the streetlights flicker. My phone buzzed again, this time from Liam. You've been quiet. How's the family fallout? I typed, quieter than their heater. He sent back a laughing emoji, then a voice note. You know, Dana, you don't have to keep proving you're the strong one. You already are. I replayed it 3 times before replying. I'm not proving anything. I'm just finally being heard by the silence. 2 days later, another knock, harder this time. When I opened the door, Dad stood there again, less angry, more tired. He didn't even bother with small talk. I talked to Melanie, he said, holding up a pen and the utility transfer forms. She said you'll sign these. I didn't take them. I already did. She has them. He looked startled. You did? Yeah. You can stop camping outside my piece now. He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the same envelope Melanie had given me earlier. You didn't take this. Because it's not money that's owed, Dad? He rubbed his jaw. Then what is? I stared at him. Respect. But that's not transferable. He looked down, quiet for a long moment. You used to fix everything, Dana. I did, I said softly, even people who didn't want fixing. His shoulders sagged. For the first time, I saw not the man who barked orders, but the man who didn't know what to do when his orders stopped working. He finally said, You really don't hate us, do you? I shook my head. If I did, I'd still be there. He nodded once, like he understood just enough to walk away. Goodbye, kid. Bye, Dad. The door closed. The quiet that followed wasn't victory, it was balance. That night, I poured a drink, open in my window, and felt the cold air brush my face. I thought of all the years I'd kept their house warm, all the nights I'd fixed things that no one thanked me for. And now, for the first time in my life, the only thing I was keeping running was me. 3 days passed. No calls, no emails, no passive-aggressive food deliveries. The silence was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat echo in it. I thought I'd feel lonely. Instead, I felt weightless. My utilities were now transferred out of my name, my credit score safe, my apartment humming quietly under my control. Every bill that came in had my name on it, and for the first time that felt like ownership, not obligation. Then, just as I started to believe the peace would last, the doorbell rang again. When I opened the door, Aunt Melanie stood there with that knowing half-smile of hers. You have a visitor, she said, stepping aside. Behind her, holding a 6-pack of beer and an envelope, stood Dad. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, just deflated, like someone had finally let the hot air out of his pride. Melanie winked at me. I'll let you two talk. Then she left us in the hallway like we were two awkward strangers who'd just been set up on a blind date neither wanted. Dad didn't move until I said, "You can come in. I charge by the minute now." He gave a weak smile. Fair enough. He stepped into the apartment, looking around like he was touring a museum of what independence looked like. "So this is the place," he said. "Yep, all mine. No leeches allowed." He winced, then nodded. I deserved that. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a check. $200. The same amount I'd quietly sent every month for years to cover heat, water, Wi-Fi, everything that kept that house alive. "I talked to Melanie," he said. "She told me what you covered and what you canceled." He cleared his throat. "I didn't realize." I laughed quietly. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was the kind that spills out of the hole where trust used to live. "You didn't realize the money leaving your account wasn't yours?" I asked. He shifted awkwardly. "I didn't think—" "No," I said, interrupting. "You didn't." We stood there in that small apartment, surrounded by walls that had absorbed more honesty in 10 minutes than our house had in a decade. Finally, he said, "I want to fix it, all of it. I know I can't erase what I said, but maybe we start over." He lifted the six-pack like a peace offering. Figured we could talk like grown-ups. I looked at him for a long time. Once that gesture would have melted me. Once I would have taken the beer, sat down, and let myself believe that people change overnight. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I handed the envelope back. "Keep it." He frowned. "You're not taking the money?" "No," I said firmly, "because this was never about money. It's about every time I held that house together while you acted like I was some freeloading burden. You called me a parasite in front of everyone, and Mom didn't say a word. You can't untoast that." He stared at me. "What do I need to do to fix it?" I shook my head. "Nothing. Because you can't fix what you never tried to build." He swallowed hard. For a second, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Regret. Not the kind you perform for sympathy. The kind that aches. He turned toward the door. "I'll get out of your way then." As he reached for the handle, I said quietly, "Dad?" He paused. "You once said I was dependable." He turned confused. "Yeah. I was never dependable. I was desperate. Desperate for approval. Desperate to be seen. I fixed everything hoping one day someone would notice who fixed me." He lowered his head, and for a brief second I thought he might cry. But he didn't. He just nodded, opened the door, and left. That night I sat on the couch, still the borrowed one from Liam's cousin, and stared at the check Dad had left behind. I hadn't noticed he'd slipped it onto my counter before leaving. I picked it up, looked at the amount, and whispered, "This is the cheapest apology I've ever seen." Then I tore it in half, dropped it into the trash, and felt something unclench in my chest. Later that evening, I texted Liam. "He came by." He replied instantly, "Your dad?" "Yeah." "How did it go?" "Like a bad rerun." He sent a heart, then a photo of his messy kitchen counter. "Dinner tomorrow?" "My treat. No family invited." "Only if the Wi-Fi works," I texted back. "It does. I pay the bill." I smiled. That was love, I realized. Not grand gestures, just two people who pay their own bills and still choose each other anyway. The next morning, the quiet was different. Not the brittle kind that follows arguments, the soft kind that follows closure. I opened my laptop to check emails and saw one from First West Energy. Subject: Account closure confirmed. I stared at it for a long time. For years, that account had been a chain around my ankle, invisible but heavy. Now it was done. I poured coffee, sat by the window, and let the morning light spill across the floor. My reflection in the glass didn't look like someone who'd been cut off from her family. It looked like someone who'd finally stopped bleeding for them. That afternoon, a new message popped up on my phone. Not from Dad, not from Mom, not even from Rachel. It was from Tara, Liam's ex. Her post had gone semi-viral, a thinly veiled jab. Some people think independence is strength, when it's really just bitterness in disguise. And right beneath it, Rachel's like, I stared at it for a second, then laughed. Not the bitter kind, the free kind. Because that was the old pattern. Let someone else tell my story while I stayed quiet. But now, silence was mine to choose. So I left it alone. No reply, no defense, just peace. That night, I wrote a note to myself on a yellow sticky and stuck it on the fridge. You don't owe anyone warmth who leaves you in the cold. And I meant it. It's been 3 weeks since the knock. 3 weeks since the check, the speech, and the quiet that followed. No calls, No accidental messages from Mom. Not even a funny meme from Rachel pretending everything's fine. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting. Not for apologies, not for validation, not for a seat at a table I'd already built from scratch somewhere else. My mornings had a rhythm now. Coffee at 7, job calls by 9, invoices by noon. The same work I used to do for free was now booked, billed, and appreciated. Funny how value shifts once you stop giving it away. Sometimes Liam would stop by after work, bringing sandwiches and a lopsided grin. He never asked about my family unless I brought them up. He just listened, steady and kind. One night, while fixing a leaky pipe under my sink, he said, "You know, I think you finally found your peace." I smiled. "Yeah, it's weird, right? It's so quiet, it almost feels loud." He wiped his hands on a rag and grinned. "That's what freedom sounds like. Just enough space for your own thoughts." I didn't reply, but later, when I lay in bed, I realized he was right. A week later, an unexpected message popped up on my phone. "Aunt Melanie, you're going to want to see this. Check the video I sent. Wait for the 18-second mark." I clicked it. It was filmed at a birthday party. Rachel's daughters, I guessed. Plastic balloons, paper plates, the faint chaos of family, pretending things were normal. Dad was there at the table, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. Mom was fussing with forks. Rachel was chatting about sports like she actually knew what a touchdown was. Then a woman's voice off camera asked, "So, where's your other daughter? The one who used to fix everything?" There was a pause. Dad's expression shifted, like something behind his eyes cracked open. Then, quietly, he said, "We don't talk much anymore. She was the glue. We didn't realize until it cracked." 18 seconds, that's all it took. I replayed it 3 times, not because I needed to hear it, but because I couldn't believe it was real. The man who once raised a glass and called me a leech had finally called me the glue. But I didn't text him. I didn't call. I didn't even send Melanie a heart emoji. Because sometimes acknowledgement isn't an invitation. It's just confirmation that the truth finally caught up. A few days later, a small package appeared at my doorstep. No return address. Just my name written in familiar, shaky handwriting. Inside was a simple note on lined paper. "We made a lot of noise. You did all the work. We didn't see it. That's on us." No signature, no names, just a house key taped to the back. I stared at it for a long time. The metal glinted in the light, cold and weightless. For years, that key had been my badge of duty. Proof that I belonged. Proof that I had to show up, fix, pay, smile. Now it was just a piece of metal. I set it on the counter. Didn't throw it away, didn't hang it up. Just let it rest there, like a relic from a life that no longer owned me. 6 months later, my life looked nothing like it used to. I had my own workshop, a small, sturdy space with a flickering neon sign above the door. Dana Davis Repairs. Dependable, not desperate. It made people laugh. That was the point. Inside, taped to the wall above my desk, hung a framed printout of the message I'd sent the family group chat months ago. Effective December 1st, I am no longer your unpaid technician, landlord, or emotional punching bag. Good luck. Clients would read it and laugh. Family drama, they'd ask. And I'd grin. You could say that. But mostly, it's a story about boundaries that finally paid off. Sometimes, late at night, when the shop was quiet and the only sound was the hum of the heater I installed myself, I'd think about the house I left behind. Not with anger anymore, just distance. I wondered if they finally learned how to reset a pilot light, or pay a bill, or talk to each other without using me as the translator. I hoped they did, because if they didn't, that wasn't my emergency anymore. A few weeks ago, I got a message from Rachel. Just one line. "He misses you. We all do." I read it, smiled softly, and replied, "I'm glad. Missing me means you finally noticed I was there." No bitterness, just truth. Because love without respect isn't love, it's labor. And I was done clocking in. One evening, as I closed up the shop, Liam walked in holding 2 coffees. "For the boss," he said. I smirked. "You trying to get a discount?" He grinned. "Already got one. You." "Cheesy," I said. "But fine, I'll allow it." We stood there in the doorway as the sun dropped low, painting the workshop gold. My hands smelled like sawdust and freedom. I leaned against the counter, watching the neon sign flicker, and said, "You know what's funny? I used to think home was something you had to earn." Liam handed me the coffee. "And now?" "Now I think home's the place that doesn't call you a leech." He laughed softly, reached over, and brushed a smudge of grease from my cheek. "Then you're finally home." And for once I believed it.